I have one rule in life. Stay 2 steps behind the spotlight. Let someone else stand in it. Do your job, go home, and under no circumstances, let anyone actually hear you. I broke that rule on a Thursday. Which feels about right, because Thursdays are the day the week stops pretending it's going fine. My name is Mara Voss. I'm 23, I write melodies in the Notes app of a cracked phone screen, and I have been a backup singer at Hollow Sound Studio for 14 months. I know every corner of that building. The coffee machine on the 2nd floor that only works if you kick it twice on the left. The recording booth that smells like old ambition and someone else's forgotten dreams. The exact spot in the hallway where the acoustics are so good that sometimes I stop, close my eyes, and just listen to myself exist for a second. Nobody else knows about that spot. That was fine. That was the whole point. I didn't come to Hollow Sound to be heard. I came because it was the closest I could get to music without having to actually be someone. I do harmonies for other people's choruses. I fix pitch and post. I hand engineers their coffee and pretend I didn't just hear them say a track was missing something, because I already know exactly what it's missing, and saying so would require being noticed. Being noticed has never gone well for me. Then Celeste Vane walked in and made everything significantly worse. You've heard of Celeste even if you think you haven't. She's the kind of artist whose voice makes you pull your car over because you can't drive and feel that much at the same time. 26. 2 albums, 1 world tour, a Grammy nomination she talked about like it mildly inconvenienced her. She wore vintage band tees and moved through rooms like she'd already decided how they'd remember her. She arrived on a Thursday morning with 3 people carrying her equipment. I was kicking the coffee machine. She watched me do it. I didn't notice. I got my coffee, turned around, and walked directly into her. Hot coffee. White vintage tea. Complete silence from everyone in the room. I'm fairly sure my soul filed a resignation letter on the spot. I'm so sorry, I didn't see you, I can pay for that, or I can just disappear forever, whichever works. All of that came out as one sound that wasn't quite a word. Celeste looked down at her shirt, then up at me. You kick it on the right side, she said flatly. That's why it takes so long. And walked past me like I was part of the furniture. Which, fair. I spent the rest of the morning telling myself this was fine. She'd record her album, leave, and I would remain invisible. The system would continue. Everything would be okay. Then our studio director, Gene, called me into his office and said 4 words that rearranged my entire nervous system. You're her vocal producer. I blinked. I'm her what? Her original producer dropped out this morning. You know her catalog better than anyone here, Mara. Don't think I haven't noticed. She needs someone by Monday. I opened my mouth to say absolutely not. To say I was a backup singer, not a producer. To say the last time I tried to be someone's anything professionally, I cried in a parking garage for 40 minutes. What came out was, okay. Jean looked relieved. I looked like someone who had just agreed to something deeply against their own survival instincts. I was right.
Enjoying the story? Subscribe now and never miss a single word.
First session was Monday at 9 a.m. I arrived at 8:47 with color-coded tempo breakdowns, 3 printed references of her previous albums, and the energy of someone about to take an exam they absolutely did not study for. Celeste arrived at 9:11. No apology. Just walked in, dropped her bag, looked at my notes spread across the table and said, "What is all of this?" "Preparation," I said. She picked up one sheet, scanned it, set it back down. "You've been listening to my music." "I work here," I said. "It's kind of unavoidable." She looked at me then. Really looked. Like she was deciding something important and hadn't made up her mind yet. "You're the girl who ruined my shirt. You're the girl who ruined my Thursday," I said. And then immediately wanted to be absorbed directly into the floor because I had not planned to say that out loud. One horrible second of silence. Then the corner of her mouth moved. Barely. Half a millimeter. "Fair," she said. And sat down. I told myself that wasn't a smile. I told myself we were professionals. I told myself the next few weeks would be clean, efficient, and completely uneventful. I was wrong about all 3. By day 3, we had a system. I'd pull references, she'd reject half of them without explanation. I'd push back, She'd raise an eyebrow, we'd argue for 20 minutes, and somehow land on something better than either of us started with. It was infuriating. It was also the most creatively alive I'd felt in 14 months. Not that I was going to say that out loud. Celeste worked like she performed, completely, no halfway. She'd sing the same line 40 times until it felt like the first time. She'd stop mid-take, press her fingers to her temples, and say, "It's not there yet," and I'd know exactly what she meant even when I couldn't explain why. That was the part that unsettled me. We kept finishing each other's sentences in the booth. She'd hum a direction she wanted, and I'd build it before she finished the thought. She noticed. She didn't say anything about it, but she noticed, I could tell, because she started humming more, like she was testing how far it went. It went embarrassingly far. "You have good ears," she said on day 5, not looking up from her lyric sheet. "You have a good voice," I said. "Someone should have told you sooner." She did look up then. "Someone's telling me now," she said quietly. I looked back at my notes like they were suddenly the most interesting thing in the room. My brain, unhelpfully, chose that exact moment to malfunction. The problem with rivals is that the line between competing and connecting is thinner than it looks. We disagreed about everything: tempo, layering, when to strip a track back, when to let it breathe. But the disagreements started feeling less like arguments and more like conversations neither of us wanted to end. She started staying later than necessary. So did I. We told ourselves it was the album. One evening, everyone else had gone home. Just us, the low hum of the monitors, and a half-finished track that wasn't working, and we both knew it. I'd been staring at the same waveform for 20 minutes when Celeste leaned back in her chair and said, "Why are you always hiding?" I looked up. "What?" "In sessions. In the hallway. You do this thing where you make yourself smaller when anyone walks in." She tilted her head. "Why?" My throat did something complicated. "I'm a backup singer," I said. "Small is kind of the job description." She looked at me for a long moment. "Not in here, it isn't." The room felt suddenly very quiet. I didn't know what to do with the way she said that, like it was a fact she'd already decided and wasn't interested in debating. I changed the subject. She let me. But the question stayed in the room long after we both went home. It was Jean who accidentally lit the match. End of week 2, label showcase. Every artist currently recording at Hollow Sound had to present a work in progress to the executive team. Celeste was scheduled. I was supposed to sit in the back and operate the playback. Except Jean, in a moment of catastrophic helpfulness, told the label executives that the secret ingredient in Celeste's new album was her vocal producer. And then pointed directly at me. 12 pairs of eyes. Expensive suits. Complete silence. Celeste turned to look at me from across the room. Her expression was completely unreadable. Then one of the executives leaned forward and said, "We'd love to hear something from you directly. A reference track. Something that shows us how you're shaping her sound." The room waited. Here is the thing I had not told anyone at Hollow Sound. Not Jean. Not the engineers. Not Celeste. 3 weeks earlier, before any of this started, I had recorded something. Alone in the studio at 11 p.m. when I thought everyone had left. A full original track. Melody, lyrics, harmonies, all of it. Everything I'd been swallowing for 14 months poured into 4 minutes and 12 seconds. I'd saved it under a file name that was just a string of numbers. I thought it was safe. I did not know that Celeste had heard it. She raised her hand slightly in the silence and said, "Actually, I have something." She pulled out her phone, connected it to the room's speakers, and played it. My track. My voice. My 11 p.m. secret. Filling the entire room. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I just stood there while every single feeling I'd ever tucked neatly into the background played out loud in front of 12 strangers, and the one person whose opinion had somehow started to matter more than it should. When it ended, the executives loved it. Words like raw and authentic and "this is exactly what the label needs" floated around the room. I heard none of it. Because Celeste had turned to look at me, and for the first time since I'd met her, she looked uncertain. Like she'd done something that had made perfect sense until the moment she did it. After the room cleared, she reached for my arm. "Mara." I stepped back. "That wasn't yours to play," I said. My voice came out quieter than I wanted. which was somehow worse than if I'd shouted. She opened her mouth, closed it. I walked out before she could find the words. And for the first time in 14 months, I didn't make myself small doing it. I just left.
Enjoying the story? Subscribe now and never miss a single word.
I want to tell you I handled the next 24 hours with grace and maturity. I did not. I went home, sat on my kitchen floor, and ate cereal directly from the box for 40 minutes while staring at the wall. Very dignified. Very adult. Completely recommend it. My phone had 17 notifications. 12 from Jean. 2 from studio colleagues. 2 from numbers I didn't recognize, probably label people. 1 from Celeste. I read Jin's messages. I ignored the rest. The message from Celeste sat at the bottom of my screen like something I'd have to deal with eventually. Like a bill you leave unopened because the moment you read it, it becomes real. I left it unopened. I called in sick the next morning. First time in 14 months. I sat by my window with cold coffee and tried to untangle how I felt. Which was complicated. Because half of me was furious. That track was private, it was mine. It was the one thing I'd made entirely for myself, and she'd taken it and put it on display without asking, without warning, without even a heads up that she'd found it. But the other half, the quieter, more inconvenient half, kept replaying the moment she pressed play. She hadn't played it to impress the label. She hadn't played it to steal credit or take up space. She'd played it because she wanted 12 strangers in expensive suits to understand what I was. What I could do. She'd handed them the most unguarded version of me she could find, which was either the most violating thing anyone had ever done, or the most certain. I still hadn't decided which. She was waiting outside the studio the next morning. Not inside, outside, on the steps, in the cold, with 2 coffees and the expression of someone who had rehearsed what they wanted to say and then decided to throw it all out. She held out the coffee. I took it because I'm not unreasonable and also I hadn't slept. I'm not going to say I'm sorry for playing it, she said. Because I'm not. Not for that part. I looked at her. Great apology. Really? I'm sorry I didn't ask, she said. I should have asked. I knew the second it started playing that I should have asked. She exhaled. But Mara, that track. That voice. She shook her head slightly. I've been in this industry for 6 years. I have never heard anything that sounded that honest. My chest did something I wasn't prepared for. You could have just told me that, I said quietly. You didn't have to play it to a room full of strangers. I know, she said. I panicked. I blinked. You panicked. You were about to go back to being invisible, she said. And I panicked. The honesty of that landed somewhere I wasn't expecting. Celeste Vane 2 albums, world tour, Grammy nomination, panicking over me disappearing back into the background. I didn't know what to do with that. Why do you even care, I said. Not accusingly. Genuinely. You came here to record your album. I'm the backup. That's how this works. She was quiet for a moment. Not in here it isn't, she said. Same words as before. Except this time she wasn't talking about the studio. The street was quiet around us. Morning light doing that thing where it makes everything look slightly more significant than it probably is. Or maybe exactly as significant as it is. I'm still not sure. The label wants to sign you, she said. Independently. Your own project. I stared at her. What? Jean called me last night. They want to meet with you next week. She looked at me carefully. I didn't plan that part. That was just you. Just your voice in a room. I sat down on the step because my legs made an executive decision without consulting me. My own project. My name on something. Not 2 steps behind, front and center, fully visible, no shadows. Everything I'd convinced myself I didn't want. Celeste sat down next to me. Close. Not touching, but close enough that I was aware of every inch between us. For what it's worth, she said softly, I've been singing for 6 years, and I've never once finished someone's sentence before they finished it. She looked at me sideways. That only happens with you. I laughed to spite myself. The kind of laugh that comes out when something hits too true to do anything else with. You're so annoying, I said. You're so talented, she said back. And you've been standing in your own way since before I even got here. We sat there in the morning cold, 2 coffees between us, the studio door not yet open. And something that had been wound tight in my chest for 14 months, maybe longer, finally loosened. I didn't kiss her on the steps. That would have been too easy. Too clean. We're not that kind of story. What I did was turn to her and say, the track needs a second voice. She went still. The one they heard yesterday, I said, looking straight ahead. It's missing something. I've always known what it was missing. I just didn't think I was allowed to ask for it. Silence. Then, when do we start? She said. And I smiled. Not the backup smile. Not the stay invisible, don't take up space smile. Mine. Just mine. We went inside. And for the first time in 14 months, I didn't find my usual corner. I walked to the center of the room, set down my coffee, and pulled out my notes. Celeste watched me from the doorway. That half-millimeter smile again. Except this time I didn't pretend I hadn't seen it. You kick it on the left side, by the way, I said without turning around. The coffee machine. I've always known. I just liked having a reason to stay a little longer. A pause. Mara Voss, she said slowly. Celeste Vane, I said back. She laughed. Real and warm and nothing like a Grammy nomination. Everything like a person. And that was it. No grand confession, no dramatic airport run, no mic drop moment. Just two people in a recording studio, a track that needed a second voice, and 14 months of hiding finally, quietly, spectacularly over. So if you've ever made yourself invisible in a room where you deserve to be seen, this one's for you. Hit that like button, subscribe, and come back for more stories. Also, don't forget to comment which part of the story did you like the most. Thank you. Bye.